Hi, I'm Steve Michaela from Verity471. In this video, I'll be showing how Verity471 supports managing third-party risk by helping security teams apply threat intelligence in practical, effective ways. Specifically, you'll see how our third-party exposure module connects security scanning, threat intel, and workflows to identify critical risks and ultimately drive better decisions. So to show you exposure mode, let's get over to exposure mode by using the mode switcher. So right now I'm in Intel mode and I'm going to pivot over to exposure. What I'm seeing here is third-party exposure. In another video, we can show attack surface exposure, but this focus is going to be really on third-party exposure. So most importantly, what you're seeing here is an overview of your third-party risk based on the third parties you've configured in the platform for monitoring. To show you how that would work, I would create a monitor over here. I would give it a name. Let's call it, say, Acme. And we can put in any domain names, IP ranges, and so on as targets. And then we can assign an importance to that third party and the type of scanning methodology we want to use. We can be passive, where we won't even contact the network of that third party at all. Or we can do something like balanced, where there's some port scanning and some other security checks, which will contact the network of that third party, and complete, which is a more comprehensive level of scanning, including vulnerability scanning. And you would set the frequency, which might be weekly, monthly, daily, or manual, if you want to just do it on an ad hoc basis. And then from there, you would create the monitor. So going back to the screen we had before, what you're seeing here is the dashboard. And most importantly here, what we're trying to present is an overall picture of your third-party risk, broken up into a few different dimensions. We present here an exposure score, which is basically an aggregate score of all your third parties that you've configured. We enable you to pivot quickly to the critical third parties. So those are the third parties that have the most risk. We also have a top 5 risky third parties here, and we show which monitors or which third parties have been updated in the last 30 days. Now, obviously, this is demo data, so you can expect some of the numbers to be somewhat off and skewed, but it should serve our purposes here to kind of walk through the platform. Now, what we see with the risk assessment matrix is all the third parties. If you remember, with each third party, you can configure an importance, and that will influence where it gets placed on the matrix, as well as the third party risk that's being identified. So based on the scanning of that third party and the number of findings that have been found, that informs the score. And that score will then, together with the importance of that third party, place it somewhere on the matrix here. So we can see we have one third party of catastrophic importance and critical criticality. We can click that, and we can see we have our third party here that we created as a test. We can now click into that, and we can see the dashboard for this particular third party. And what this is showing us, again, is an aggregate view of all the findings, so all the security issues and risks that have been identified with this third party in different dimensions. So we see an exposure score as an overall aggregate of those findings. We can go to the critical findings if we want to, total findings, and so on. And we can see a trend over time. What you might notice as well is that there's a threat label here on some of the findings, and some that don't have it. So you can see here we found a database server exposed. There's no threat label here. So what this is just telling us is, hey, we found a database potentially exposed over the internet, something worth checking out, surely. But what we see here with the threat label is that we found a vulnerability, but we were also able to contextualize it with Intel 471's threat intelligence about this vulnerability. And that will include, obviously, a summary, pretty standard stuff there, but underground activity as well. So this is what our analysts and researchers have identified as underground activity about this vulnerability, which may include whether it's being weaponized, whether it's being sold. And then you can pivot from here into the more detailed reporting about that vulnerability. But what you can see here is that because of this contextualization, you can make a better decision about whether patching priority. Of course, being a third party, you have little influence over that. But if you see, for example, the third party has a critical vulnerability that is actively weaponized and being targeted, that might give you some concern about that third party security posture, which may trigger perhaps a third party risk assessment or questionnaire or reaching out to that third party directly. Now, if we want to go into detail, we can see all the findings. So these are all the security issues that have been identified with third party. Again, this is all demo data. But what we wanted to really do here is not just give you a score and some kind of high level information, but actually enable you to see all the details that